So today we're doing video number 2. So we're gonna be doing block molds. So like I discussed in the first video, we're gonna be doing block molds as the purpose of it being slightly different to the flat molds, where they would need a cut or some alteration to actually cast and have the piece for the piece to actually release out of the mold. So what we're going to be doing is another one of my sculptures, my little skulls. This is actually a wax cast that's for a project I'm going to be doing, but you guys will see that later. So let's just get cracking on this. And then, so our main thing with doing these block molds is undercuts. So you guys will hear about undercuts. It's basically like what we discussed with the flat molds. Anything that can't be removed in a perfect 90 will result in an undercut. So this section can't be lifted from the skull without actually grabbing on it, so that's an undercut. That cavity we have in here, that's another undercut. It's going to grab. So basically once the silicone goes over, it's going to have these little locks in there that's going to grab, and this is not going to want to come out. So I'm going to show you guys how to work around that and to make some nice block molds, and also how to cut the block molds that they actually key back in nicely. So you could, even with this shape, this is a bit more basic shape. So I'm actually going to show you guys, this is the mold that this came out of. So yeah, it's a basic shape and you could probably get it out without having to cut your mold. But what actually ends up happening is, as you can see here, this mold has damaged quite severely. It looks like it's been cut up. And that's just from a lot of flex on thin parts, and you get tearing happening. So this is very hard to hide in your cast. So I'm going to show you guys how to purposefully do these slits, take some of the resistance off of the silicone so you can release your pieces nice and easily. Cool. So when you guys are doing block molds or flat molds or whatever, I said it in the first video, you can use generic containers. We're going to be using this little guy. It's a little bit dirty, but we're going to be using that. So especially if you're working with round shapes or square shapes or more geometric shapes, you can possibly find containers that you could just pop over. Then you don't have the issue of having to make walls or use shim or anything to create any walls. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I also want to show you guys a little thing. I mean, some of you might know it, but it's helped me. So now using this container, in most instances you would just pop it down like that because you already have a flat surface, cutting the surface open. I actually want to do it in reverse and stick it down like that, but it generally applies for cutting anything that's round. So basically how you end up getting a straight line to cut something like this, I'm going to give you guys a little tutorial. So basically get a little spacer or anything that's flat that is about the right height that you would actually want to cut on. You basically take your marker and you place this down. So just double check basically this height to where it actually touches on your container. You can adjust this with anything flat. You pop your marker down once you're happy with the distance. You put that down and you just keep turning your marker. Basically keep turning the container, keep the marker stable, and you just pop that around and you'll actually get a perfect line on which you cut your thing. Yeah. Okay, so for this, let's quickly chop this up. So I'm actually going to use the bottom grid that I already drew out. Just grab your samurai sword or whatever you prefer on using and slice it up. And this guy, pretty much just going to try to slide it in there. Please guys, be careful when working with blades, especially to our younger little humans. Don't cut yourself, please. These guys are quite dangerous. You're gonna mess yourself up if you slide with these. So a good piece of advice whenever working with blades, please guys, always away from you, never cut towards yourself, because if this slides out, that's how you end up turning into a fish and cutting yourself some gills. So please don't do this, always away. And check your fingers. Why is it not going on the line? Okay, let's just turn this sideways, make it a little bit easier for me. It's all flopping now, come on. There we go. Cool. So, take that little notch off. Cool. So, next step would be obviously securing this guy. So, I like the spinny spins. Cool. So, securing this guy, generally when you're using your harder plastics and it's not like acetates, you're fine to go with glue gun. So that's what we're going to be doing. Just realized, okay, so we're going to do this, but we need a board. Like I told you guys, when I mold stuff, I try and do it on a nice solid surface. I discussed this in the first video. It helps having a solid surface because even if my bottom table is super unlevel, I can level this out, so I can even have it on a table that's like that because I can proportionately level it out with my little smush level technique that I showed you guys also in the first video. Basically take a block, roll out a sausage of clay, you half it again, and you've got 4 little equal pieces. We take these 4 pieces, smash them into like little pillars, use the palms. Pop 2. You want to try and focus them in the corners, if possible. If you're doing weird shapes, just go with your gut. Just go where your heart takes you. Smash this down, and you always want to try and push all 4 at the same time when doing this. But before we completely level this out, let's just quickly do some markings because I'm going to want to push on this like this. I'm going to pop this down. I'm just going to trace this out quickly. I'm smushing it. Oh, it went all wonky now. Yeah, let me just try and fix that a little bit. Kind of. Don't do what I just did. Don't smush it down. Okay, cool. That seems fine. Then what we can actually do is... Oh no, that's horrible. Excuse all the lines, so it'll be this one. Another thing, when filling, you kind of want to know when you've put enough silicone in and to check your measurements. So again, I'm going to use this guy. This is just tongue depressors that's stacked on each other. So generally these guys are like 1.2, 1.5 mil. So I'll put a couple of them together and I have a 12 mil. I'm going to pop, for our American friends, I got you. There's the freedom units. Okay, so 12 mils. Whatever the freedom units is, pop this guy on your highest point, and then you can basically check where that levels out on your container, and we can do a little mark just so we know where our level is. That you can translate. It's a little bit see-through on the inside. I don't know if you guys can see that. So we look on the inside, and then we can just do a little line. So now we know we don't want to fill, we don't really want to put in more silicone than that. You can also use this line then to actually measure if you're wanting to calculate your amounts. So this is probably something we didn't really focus on the first video. If you want to calculate amounts, go check out Smooth On's page. They actually have really good product calculators and things for different types of molds, whether it's brush-ons or block molds or whatever you're making. There's really cool calculators and other apps out there, but Smooth On's ones are really good. It's made for products. If you're using Smooth On products, so much better. Just go on there, click, check all your settings for whatever you're doing or as close as possible, and then you can actually calculate how much silicone usage you would use. So if you were doing that, you could now use your little mark, pop a ruler in, and you could actually check how much that is, and then you guys can work out your silicone. So it should be fine till the line. If not, if you're just mixing by eye, just make sure it's till the line. Cool, so now we got our marking going. Now what we need to do is level the board out, but before we're going to level the board out and stick this down, I explained this in the first video a little bit and touched on it. Putting this just down like that, you have a chance where it's going to move, so a little spinny spin or whatever, but also if you're pouring in, it could adjust slightly and move around in the mold. It's probably not going to float, but you don't want it to move around. So you can use glue gun. If you really want to use glue gun and you want to tag something down with the glue gun, that's fine, but get it really hot as a little bit of a pro tip. Don't just put it on and as soon as that glue starts peeking out of the gun, put it on, push it down. Sometimes with that you get a little discrepancy of like 1 or 2 moles, and that can mess with you. Depends how like perfect you want to be with the process. So if you want to use a glue gun, get it hot and then quickly pop it on and then apply pressure to squeeze out any excess underneath your piece. I generally don't like doing that unless you can really get away with it. For this, because this isn't specifically going to float, our friend petroleum jelly again. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take a little glob. Wow, a little that glob is but a decent glob. I'm going to pop that at the bottom. You're just going to kind of level it out. Take some of that off. Take most of it off. Stay. Good boy. Level some of this out. Cool. So now we just check our little ring that we created. We kind of want to center it in the middle just so we know we have equal space of silicone all around. Another thing I didn't really touch on was to make sure, again with molds, you generally want to work in a discrepancy of about 10 moles to 8 mil, I would say, is safe. Don't try not to go less than 8 mil on your molds. If you want to, or you know your silicone, or you know your product, that's fine. I mean, do what you want. You know, you've done it before. If you don't know, safe to stick with 8 mil or a little bit more, especially if you're starting out. So just make sure that you have a good amount of space everywhere. So now checking this at the back, I can see it's not even. Just want to check it's curving inward, so we have a little bit more play in front. This seems to give appropriate spacing. And if we now were to double check, I obviously double check my containers beforehand. So we just check, that seems good. Seems roughly a centimeter. Like I said, this is 12 mil. Let's maybe move that over slightly. The back seems cool. Happy days. So, oh wow, so clean. Move. Let's pop this guy back on. So, oh wait, actually, I forgot. Let's just quickly, once you've actually smushed down petroleum jelly, be sure to just have a look-see at the bottom of your piece, and you'll actually see that you have a little bit of smush that, especially if you apply the pressure to your piece, that actually came out the bottom. So you just kind of want to brush that away, because obviously, same thing with glue gun, any material you put at the bottom is either going to smush out or bulk out, and it's going to be picked up in the silicone detail. When you're working with the petroleum jelly, get a little rag on standby. So now we just brush away the excess. So just look, and then it's obviously up to your judgment. It's best if you try and not get the petroleum jelly on your piece itself, if you can avoid it. Also, keep release brushes separate from your other brushes. You do not want to paint something with a brush that has petroleum jelly or release agents on. You're gonna have a bad time. So I'd say either mark release brushes on the brush itself, keep them separate, whatever, or if you don't care and you just like always having your brushes clean, it's another option. Just clean it properly and pack it away. This also, if you guys play a little bit with these like squishing methods, and like I said, compared to glue gun, petroleum jelly is quite controlled because it's kind of like a clayey substance, or you can manipulate it like I can now with the brush. You can actually end up really getting nice edges where your piece bonds to the flat base it's on. You can actually, because now you can alter the petroleum jelly, you can actually create really nice lips. Just depends how much time you want to spend on it, and obviously at what level of mold making you are, or what the purpose of the mold is. So it is a nice method to just play with and fix any imperfections in the bottom. We're gonna delve deep, guys. There'll be a lot more, and if you guys have requests for stuff, and I get a couple of requests for like a certain type of mold, we'll do that too. So just comment. You comment and you let me know. I'll show you what you want to see. Like I said, I don't actually think I mentioned this in the first one, but yes, I am a professional mold maker. I've been making molds has been my bread and butter for about a decade now, plus. Yeah, okay, so now we basically get this guy back on, make sure that it's lined up. Our little glue gun has been getting fired up. Please don't judge him. It's a rescue. He had a rough early life. When you guys are doing this, just make sure to be careful with moving this. Also, when you're gluing, don't bump it and move it. So what I try and do is I try and place this guy, and then I would actually just pop a glob in one corner. Oh, be aware of your strings if possible. I usually tend to keep it low and move around your piece, so you kind of like make the little spider webs around your piece and they don't go inside. You see that? Don't get that inside. It's not cool. So just pop a tag there and a pop a tag here. And you let that quickly harden up. If you do that, you can actually just glue with ease and you don't have that issue of maybe bumping it and sploosh. Cool. So once it's nice and tacked down, you don't have the worry of when you bump it, it will move. So now it's tacked down. I'm just gonna pop that around. Just make sure you don't have little breaks or little holes in. A lot of times I've found people saying, you know, oh, I glue gun this down, but I got bubbles. See, there's a bubble. You actually have to put a glob down and push the glob with the gun so that it actually seals. You know, you're not going to trap a little air bubble in. You guys need to learn to master the air bubbles, because that's our biggest challenge with mold making, is how to not get bubbles. Make sure excuse me, make sure things are sealed correctly, they don't leak, and the liquid goes where it's supposed to go. There we go. Unplug this when done. Do not burn your house down or workshops. Cool. So just check for little bits of residue around this. Take that away. Okay, get a level. Make sure it's clean so it's accurate. Pop this down. And now you're gonna smush your clay. So when you're pushing down on your board, try and push everywhere. Don't just push a singular corner, because that's gonna result in the board wobbling. So you're just gonna push this down. This is a lovely trick that can be used for mold making, casting, and it actually helps if you like using a dodgy old table, it's uneven, just smush it till your mold's level. If you have an uneven mold, or you started out making a mold, you know it's not level, you know you want to cast it accurately, just check. If you use the flat surface at the top, you can always just put your level on top of your mold itself and then level the board accordingly. So that would be more for casting purposes. So remember to check both axes, X and Y. So we check the front, we check the sides, and then for safety, I always do the opposing sides as well. So check that side, and then I'm going to check the back. Then we know we're perfectly level, as you guys can see. Cool. So next step is pouring. Let's mix up some silicone. First release, always release. Okay, so before pour, we always release. With regards to what you're going to be releasing your pieces with, it entirely depends on you, your preferred choice, or what your silicone or mold making supplier recommends. The products are used all around the world. They can be compared to other things people are using. So I'm just gonna generally, for my videos, be working with smooth-on stuff. If we get into a bit weirder and more funky projects, we're gonna be using other companies' products. But for this, ask whoever you're buying your products from, which release do they recommend? And if not, I'm gonna show you guys again, try and just work with the general release agent that I've seen most people use. So we're going to be using the Man Ease Release 200, and then we'll pour. Okay, so guys, with this whole method of doing the block molds and stuff like that, you have a little bit of a catch-22 going on. So in most essences, people would say, oh, but why didn't you release the piece before you actually put this covering over that's going to block it? Okay, so my piece is quite basic and I know the wax won't stick to the silicone. If you feel like you have a more complex piece, there's more detail to it. So now if you're doing figures and stuff that's a little bit more complex in detail, you can release it before putting your wall over. Just bear in mind that the difference with that is that when you're trying to glue down your wall, you've released your board. So there's a high chance that your walls won't bond, and you'd actually, when you're filling your mold with the silicone, it can pull loose and detach from your board, and you have a very bad time with a mold that's popped open. So it goes with your judgment. Either put the walls down, then release, if needed. If you feel like you want to release the piece really well, release the piece, put it on the board. What you can also do alternatively is give the piece a pre-spray before putting it down on the board. That way you mitigate the fact your board doesn't really have that much release on it. You get it in the hard to reach areas. Pop the wall over like I have done now. Give it a last spray and you're ready to go. So we're going to be using this. This is the Man Israelis 200. It should be, I believe, from most guys, Reynolds, Raw Materials, all of those guys. They should stock these guys. I've seen it all across the world. Most guys stocking Smooth On can use these. You can pretty much use whatever your heart desires. You can use spray cook stuff, the greasy, buttery, oily stuff. You can use other brands. I mean, there's lots of release agents that you can end up using. I'll even chat with you guys on cost-saving methods, how to even mix your own release agents out of basic products and using solvents. So for this, I like aerosols. I don't like brushing, so we're just gonna give this a little bit of a spray. Remember, I spoke about this in the first video. When spraying, don't just spray from one angle. You wanna go in and move around the piece to try and get it all the way down and in the corners. Also, don't go too close, but usually the cans have instructions on how far to spray. And with some products, try not to over release. It is a thing. I know you would think that would be silly, you know, the more the merrier, but sometimes it can actually affect curing of products. So give it a little bit of a spray. The more you know about the substance you're molding, you'll be able to dictate basically how much release do you need. Is the silicone going to grab or not? If you're not sure, release well. Don't get it all slimy and over-released. Just make sure you hit everywhere. And also, if you're concerned, even if you're using aerosols and you're not confident, you just want to make sure you're safe and your pieces don't stick. Get a little brush, clean brush, obviously. And after you've sprayed your release agent with the aerosol, you can go over it with a clean brush. Just remember, sometimes on smooth surfaces, this is quite smooth. It's been buffed and all of that. So if you go over it with a brush, you might end up getting brush strokes. That's why I tend to not like to use brush in release agents. If you don't care, if your piece is really textured, go for it. Brush, doesn't matter. So for the mix, we're doing Mold Max 30 by Smooth On. I'm just gonna use that for the mix. And then again, like we discussed in the first video, you want to scrape the sides really nicely, because we don't want to see that white. That white can be uncatalyzed silicone. If you end up having streaks, you know you probably didn't do a sufficient job mixing. So make sure to mix correctly. It's important. It's one of those things that can destroy a mold, having uncatalyzed silicone in. There's ways to fix it, but which we will discuss, but some of the fixes we'll also discuss are last minute resorts that can be done when all things go wrong. We'll also do some videos in future about when stuff really goes wrong and how to save a bad situation. Basically, it'll never be 100% perfect, but there are some tricks of the trade that have, in dire situations, either silicone busy setting while pouring, or you know, there's always these weird situations that occur that I've had to deal with. So we'll do a worst case scenario video also at some time. And then forcefully do things wrong so that I can show you guys what to do when the poop hits the fan, basically. So we just want to scratch everywhere. Make sure to scratch everywhere your uncatalyzed silicone was touching the container. Scratch the bottom really nicely just to make sure it all gets mixed well. Scratch the corners, get that depressor in the edge corner, scratch it nice and clear. And I always keep rotating my thing, you know, you keep mixing it, moving the bulk of the volume around in the container. If you can try, I never like to mix in a container where it's more than half. Especially if you're degassing, you can't really, because there's a high likelihood it's going to bubble over when putting it in the degasser. You generally want to focus on, like with Mold Max, you can get away with 3 times the volume. So, you know, if you're basically, I'd say like not going more than that. So then we have our 1, 2, that should be fine. Sometimes 3. It usually goes 3, sometimes 4. It always depends on the different types of product. Okay. Generally, best thing is never mix in a container where you got your product more than halfway. I just say that's a safe, hard and fast rule. Even if you're not degassing or that, it's just so difficult to mix product when it's like all the way up to the rim. And I know I'm not wearing gloves. I'm a bad boy. With a cloth, pop that in there, and then generally how I like to do it is you turn your pump on, close your valve to start building pressure, and then you leave that guy in. It's going to hit 0. You look inside, the liquid is going to start rising up and bubbling, and when it reaches its end point, it will all collapse and drop down. Once that occurs, you always want to try wait at least 10 to 15 seconds for to have all the bubbles actually pop. And now it's reaching its end, and there we go with the collapse. It's almost dropped back down to its original level when it was placed inside the vacuum degasser. At this point, do a nice little 10 or 15 Mississippi count and you should be good to go. If you don't care and you want to be more thorough, you can leave it in for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, it's all up to you. So once it's ready now, we just pretty much do exactly what we did. Turn the pump off, and then we're going to release the pressure. Cool. So another thing I didn't mention, when degassing, I tend to not want to leave the tongue depressor inside, as when you take it out, you're actually going to drip drops and it's going to create little micro bubbles. So once it comes out, I just like to give it a little bit of a quick 1-2 turn, move it around a little bit, and then our general high pour thin stream that we want to do. Be patient for that first bit. It's going to come out in a big glob, so just be patient. It will run and it will do its thing. We want to hit the corner there and then just have the liquid rise all on its own. When pouring into molds, whether it's flat molds, block molds, any of that, you really want to try to do it as slowly as possible. The slower you can do your pour into your mold. Obviously you gotta work with what your pot life and your timings of your product. So obviously guys, please read data sheets. I can't stress it enough. It's really important when using products, especially new products. After many years of doing this, I always still read data sheets whenever using something new. Check your data sheets and just make sure on your pot life of your products or your working time to be sure how much time you just have to do your business. You're gonna end up with way better results than trying to rush it and glob it all in here. And if you followed all this way, this last bit, to have a little bit of patience, is really going to work in your favor at the end of the day. Well, there is reasoning behind it. So what actually ends up happening is you're focusing your mass, like I said, bubbles coming out, they're getting elongated, they're breaking on their way down. As soon as that liquid hits the original spot, it's pushing all the previous liquid where it hits away from itself. So with that, you're creating a constant flow of the bubbles again moving around and breaking as they move throughout the mold. That is basically the reasoning behind pour in one location, because as soon as you move, you're basically messing with the flow of your little silicone river moving throughout your walls and your piece. So the more it moves, the more it flows around, the better results you get at the end of the day. And I always tell people, like, once your piece is covered in rubber, you can pour wherever you want. It's just while getting that detail coating running over your piece, you kind of just want to just keep focusing it in the same spot. Thin stream, keep that going, have patience, and you should end up with a really nice mold. Just always assess undercuts. Like I said, in another video, we'll start doing a bit more complex sculpts, things with more detail, things with crazier undercuts. I'm going to show you guys a bit more advanced techniques. I wanted with the first videos to just start out with some basic stuff for my beginner friends or beginner viewers. My more advanced guys and everybody that's been making molds for a while, I promise we'll do more intricate molds. We'll do some really cool stuff, fancy stuff. We're gonna, at a later stage, if it gets requested, we'll move into inner cores. We'll move, hey man, if you guys follow me long enough, we'll move into puzzle cores and creating collapsible cores with magnets. The sky's the limit, and if you want to see something specific, you just pop me a message or pop a comment, and if enough of you guys request the same thing, I will have to do it. Gotta keep you all entertained. When starting out, I'd say just be careful and monitor everything you do. That's the highest chance you'll have to actually have success in the process, is patience, making sure everything's released, you follow your steps, you level your boards, you make sure everything's sealed with your mold. Just double check everything, especially when starting out. You're gonna make mistakes, like making molds and casting stuff. Anybody that's done it enough will tell you there's no way everything's just gonna always go your way. There's gonna be problems, and that will also be why we will do worst case scenario videos. Pretty much when problems hit, it's always gonna affect the mold or the outcome of the piece, but you can lessen that. So it might still be usable depending on what it's for, but you might be able to save it, you might be able to use it for a couple of casts, or until you have money to do another mold. With bigger pieces, hey, you don't have that luxury, but that's why, you know, when you're doing bigger or more complex molds, you don't really want to stuff up or mess up. So again, it just comes back to always following your steps and not forgetting anything in your process. So follow the recipes. Here we go, the last bits of blue is disappearing. And that will be the pour, guys. If it's a mold for yourself, surface bubbles don't really matter, but I mean, I generally like to blow them, it makes them look more beautiful. Like I said, the little final blow for all of those little surface bubbles. Oh no, some of my afro. Ew. You don't want to blow too hard with the air hose. You could, like I said in my first video, you can actually end up blowing bubbles into the piece. So what you want to do is you just want to kind of softly do quick wisps, or if you can set your compressor to blow softer, that's what you want. You just want to have that movement, not too much in the same spot. As you see, the more you keep it, the deeper it digs in, and if that folds over itself, it grabs a bubble inside. So you want to avoid that, never too hard, and just keep it flowing. You just want to elongate those bubbles, have them break under the pressure of the movement, and then you sort it. Okay, so next day. I just want to apologize for, I heard on the first day's footage, I'm a little bit under the weather, guys, so I'm sorry about that. I'm fighting something, it might take me with it, but let's hope not. So sorry for a bit of the nasal and the congestiveness of it. So this guy's set up, I actually preemptively demolded it by accident. I was busy in the workshop and carrying on and forgot we actually have to shoot this. So what you're going to want to do with glue gun, generally you can dissolve it with isopropyl alcohol or isopropic alcohol. I even just use some of my excess hand sanitizer. You pop that around, and what the alcohol does is it actually destabilizes the glue gun. So you would kind of just put that on like that, dab some alcohol, or I don't know if, I'm assuming rubbing alcohol and all of that should all work. I generally just know, you want to work with your isopropyl alcohols or IPAs. They work fine. So you just pop that on, and you basically just start going in with a scraper, and the glue gun will just start detaching, and then you move all the way around, and then you would probably shove this guy in, pop it loose, and there you go. And then this should also, because of the alcohol, like I said, it destabilizes the bonding of the glue gun, so all of this should also just come loose, and there you go. No more sticking. Cool. So there's a little bit of debris. I generally like using the white melamines. I'm just using what I had lying around right now, so I don't usually like this press wood because you get all these little fibers. But also you're just going to want to wipe, especially if you use the petroleum jelly or Vaseline route, just wipe off any excess so that doesn't end up going inside of your mold and making it dirty before you can even get a cast out. You're going to want to detach this from your container. So this is also nice if you just want to save your containers or reuse them. So pop that in, squeeze that through, and then you just wiggle. Pop that through, then you just wiggle. Just going to want to break that vacuum. Mostly why molds stick is as soon as you're pouring something and it's taking the shape of something else, it actually creates a vacuum, and once that vacuum's tension is broken, it's quite easy to get things out. Just got to break that vacuum, and there we go. We should be all the way around now. Are we? There we go. Cool. Take your little cuticle cutters, pop that around. Silicone worms. There we go. Cool. That's cleaned up. See, now we got a nice flat surface. Just watch out for this liquid edge bulging. Like there, it's slightly bulging, so you just want to take that off. Just if you care about 100% nice and flat surface on your piece. That, and then we can also just quickly do this edge, clean this up. Look at the ugly piece. And I also know from the first video that little piece of Vaseline that I left in front of the piece, I did that on purpose for all of you perfectionists out there. I know it made you all crazy. So now you're actually going to see what I spoke about manipulating it. That little spot that I didn't clean up there, that's what I was saying about it creating a lip or bad edges. So here we kind of have a clean edge. As you can see there, it's quite smooth. There it's a little bit tighter. So you can see the differences in manipulating your Vaseline. And now there, we have that little bubble and weirdness happening. That's exactly where I left that piece of exposed Vaseline happening. So if you want to be, just to show the level of care you take ultimately translates into how your mold will come out. So yeah, so there's that little spot. Look at it, guys. And then you can see the difference there as well, and that's just the manipulation of the Vaseline. So let's cut it. So depending on whether you care about the piece inside, right? So if you want to look after the master, I'd suggest use something like a tongue depressor. So what I do is I actually slide that in to create like a barrier. So now when I cut, I can't hit the master basically. So now the first thing with cuts is you want to avoid straight cuts like tears. These actually result in a difficulty having the silicone readjust to its original position. So what you want to do is like, what do you call it? Like crocodile teeth basically with your cut. So you want to start at an angle, and then you're just going to basically take it and do these like little wave patterns. So you're going to want to go and wave. And organic is sometimes also a lot easier to hide than a straight line. For some reason the human eye will always focus on a straight line. So if you can make it as organic as possible, and now I just cut it all the way through there, and now you'll also see that perfectly will adjust like a puzzle piece and click back into itself, where that doesn't happen on a straight line because it's got play to move in the opposing direction. So now, sorry, I'm just going to take that out so I can see. You can keep it in and slowly adjust, and obviously use your own judgment, but I don't care too much about the master, so I'm just going to pop that out. I'm going to go in. Also try and be careful for double slits. Like I cut it a little bit there, made a double cut into my little key. So try and to not do that if possible. And obviously when doing this, just to put that out there, I'm doing the back. I saw that this is the front, so I want to focus it on the back. Obviously decide where would you prefer your cut to happen, because you might have a seam there that you would need to clean up, so bear that in mind too. Cut there. Alright, so got that little cut there. Now let's see with the tension. You got a good amount of tension. I'm gonna do it a little bit more over there. Cut it in. So now you can see we've broken the tension of the silicone, so now we got quite a lot of stretch out of it. And also, if you can, as you see, I did the same way where I started it with a directional cut, not a straight cut. You want to end it on a directional cut, not a straight cut, because the more you're going to bend on this and flex it as you use your mold, it's going to tear further. Just bear that in mind. So doing a straight cut, it's going to favor going straight a lot more. If you have a directional cut, it's going to break some of the tension and avoid stretching. So now we can just bend this open, apply, because we're breaking all of the resistance of the silicone. So now you can actually see this whole piece can just move around inside, and we don't have an issue just popping it out. And here, just to show you guys the difference, no tongue depressor or with the tongue depressor, and then there's where I took it out. So you can clearly see the cut damage on your master. If you don't care, it's fine. If you do care, use a tongue depressor, maybe a soft piece of plastic. Just slide something in there to basically mitigate you cutting your master up if you care about it. We have this little guy that is ready to cast. So let's do a cast. Remember the release, guys. So hitting all angles, and if you have a cut, try and get it in the cut as well before placing. not too much. Just get it nice and coated. Do a little bit on the outside. You don't need to put elastics on this, but if you want, and it'll be easier for you, we pop some elastics on. Less tension is always better. If it's too tight of an elastic, it can actually deform your piece. I mean, silicone squishy, guys, so just be careful. Cool. So now when you're going to pop on some elastics, just remember to check that your key happens correctly and everything sits in place. The best place to check, you can obviously see on your outer how well it's keying, but it's most important to gauge on the inside to just check if your seam line's disappearing. You're good. Pop these on. As you guys can see, these are really soft little elastics. They're just to keep the shape. They're not to deform anything. Just gonna pop those on there. And now we're ready to go cast. The next part you guys aren't allowed to see, but if you keep following me, I'll show you the tricks of the casting business. The last bit. Like I said, if you guys go follow me on Patreon, this is already starting to set. If you guys go follow me on Patreon, I'll show you guys how to do my modeling techniques, and some of the casting techniques I'm gonna leave for my Patreon, and if you guys are interested, so let me know. And there you go, a nice little marbling done there. So stay tuned. I'll show you guys how it comes out. We're just not gonna show right now how it's done. So I love you guys. I'm sorry. Done with the pour. Like I said, we'll do other videos on pouring, and this is something that I've been practicing for a while. It doesn't have too much exothermic heat anymore, so I think we're good to demold. So yeah, so I'll show you guys some casting stuff on other videos, or I'll do like Patreon videos for like specialized casting techniques. I feel like that's a little bit more of my own personal knowledge, so I'll share it, but possibly on Patreon or at a later stage with you guys. But for now, let's just do the molding side and show you the things you can make if you get creative and put in some work. So let's take those off, and then we want to clear this edge. So bearing in mind, like I said earlier, this is for another project, and there's a reason this master isn't as finished as what I would finish most things that I would mold, but I will show you guys that in coming time. So here we go, see what we have. Give birth. And there we go. A little bit of magic. And here you guys can see we have a little bit of that seam that you might have to sand off or clean up, but it is quite minimal. You can give this a nice little sand and then you're done. Super shiny. Cool. So there we go. So that's pretty much the ins and outs of block molds, guys. And as always, if you enjoyed this, leave a comment. If you didn't, leave a comment, but I won't read it. And yeah, if you want to see more, go check out my studio page. That's for my workshop. That's Strange Chemical Effects on Instagram. And then me, myself on Instagram is Chris Lestrange. And I will also leave links to everything in the bio. And go check out the Patreon if you guys are interested in more stuff and you want to learn. There's lots to teach you guys. So enjoy and have a good day.